you, but as a community, we can tag team and bring folks that can specialize in that and be able to give a lift. And we have to be able to see who isn't in the room, who is not in the room, who is underperforming. We have to be honest about it. And you need to tell us about it so we can activate them to come into the fold. That's what we're about. So finally, obviously, we have an aging population. We have baby boomers. They were the biggest generation that we had. They're aging. We have a population there that doesn't have families sometimes. We have adults that have developmental disabilities. They could be violent. They are being cared for by parents that are aging out, that are worried what is going to happen to their kids when they die. What kind of residential programs are we going to expand or develop so that we can make sure that we help them and they don't grow onto the street to be on the list of the unsheltered? Those are the kinds of things that I feel that together I'm real optimistic. Even though we have a lot of work, I'm always very confident that we can get it done because our and remember that when we're trying to find ways to problem solve, let's find a solution. In juvenile things, sometimes we're like, oh, we have a Privacy Act, we have this. There are ways to deputize each other, to sign, get trained, to sign agreements to make sure that we can make it easier for us to share the information and get things moving. And cut the red tape. I am sick of red tape. I'm over it. I believe what regulations were great, well intended, but boy, this is a dumb thing. Doesn't work here. You need to let me know so we can try and change it. That's what we're about. So today, I hope that you take the opportunity to be honest. Make sure that, be willing. If you're from the government, it's real nice to be from the government because you have this authority, but we have to take criticism, just shrug it off, be open, and be able to listen so that we can amend what we're doing. Because a lot of things we do, sometimes it's outdated. The only way we're going to make sure it's relevant is if we listen and we try to figure out how we can get on the same page. So just remember,
I don't know how
we're a team. Sometimes there's weaker members of the team. That just means that we need to give more attention to keep up with the pace. And I hope that everybody here is going to come back next year. And when I ask you, do you think that you've done enough? I hope to see the same amount of hands rising up that say no, because we still have so much more work to do. All right? Can I count on you for that? Thank you very much.
Can you check those?
So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to invite Senator Cananta to come up. And I think we're going to do this together in the interest of time, since it is, oh no, are we ahead of time? Huh? We're good? Okay. So I'm going to do a proclamation, but before I do the proclamation, I'm going to pass it on to Senator Cananta to do the resolution. I'll ask Mayor Hoffman as the other elected official to join us up on stage. And then, of course, we'll get our bosses here in the coalition to come up and tell us who else should be up here with us.
Awfully good morning. Thank you guys all for coming out here. Can we have a round of applause for all of you guys' hard work? LT had a lot of great speaking points, quite long and quite lengthy. For me, I keep it short and simple, KISS. So for me, there's a lot of challenges that we're facing with this homeless coalition. No matter which way you look at it, it's a huge dynamic, always ever-changing issue. Whether or not these people lack the discipline, it all comes and starts at home. That's the reality, right? We need to work together collaboratively, come together, and that's what this whole Homeless Awareness Month is about, and this summit, right? Specifically. So as the oversight chair of GURA and housing, it's a huge issue for me. I spoke on my political platform on Chamorro Land Trust we got all this land out there, but not a lot of people have enough access to it. We're still discussing the person on the sixth person on the wait list from 1995. Dale, that's like my age. But you know why? No offense to the older generation here. We need to have younger people step up and serve in our community and serve at the capacity that they want to see a new generation, a new product, a new generations that can usher better programs and better services. Honestly, look at my colleagues in the 37th legislature. They're the same people who have been in office. And I took a leap of faith and I ran for office. And I'm very blessed with the opportunity. But honestly, there's a lot of things that I cannot do by myself because there's 14 other people that have their own mindset, their own agenda, whether it be political or actual work. But at the end of the day, we're here to try to solve homeless coalition, homeless matters. And my office stands ready to support in whichever direction we need to. But again, we need to step up. And that's why I'm very much happy to be here to recognize each and every one of you. You look to your right, look to your left. We're all here for the same reason. We want to try to find solutions to this huge issue. We don't want to be like LA. We don't want to be like Hawaii, but we got to find solutions that can fix so that the next generation doesn't face the same challenges. But without further ado, again, I like to keep things short and simple. I have a resolution here, 251-37 core, introduced by myself and the entire 37th Guam legislative body, relative to recognizing and observance of Homeless Awareness Month during the month of November 2023, and commending the Guam Homeless Coalition for their dedication, advocacy, and selfless acts of service for the people of Guam. Again, thank you so much. A round of applause again.
Come up to the front. Yeah. All right, Senator, if you could just join us and then behind the table, I'd like to invite the coalition members, and then I'd like to also invite up the other members of the Interagency Council, Liz Napoli from GURA, Edith Pangilinan from the Guam Housing Corporation, Teresa Ariola from Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness. Okay. Come on. All right. So proclamation 2023-100 is a proclamation proclaiming November 2023 as Homelessness Awareness Month. Whereas our island observes Homelessness Awareness Month to recognize the ongoing community issue of homelessness across our island and nation, and to recognize the countless private, public, and nonprofit organizations who work tirelessly to provide support and services to those at risk of losing their home and those without a home. Whereas our island is not immune to the homelessness crisis, which is complex, with multiple contributing factors. In 2023, the point-in-time homeless count reported 1,075 homeless individuals and 406 households. Local organizations, including the Guam Homeless Coalition, aim to address homelessness and identify solutions and services to assist those at risk of being homeless and homeless youth, families, and adults. The mission of the Guam Homeless Coalition is to enhance life skills, access to resources to permanent housing, and provide training for employment, to provide support and self-sufficiency to our neighbors without homes. The Office of Homelessness and Poverty Prevention also works closely with other public bodies to provide access to temporary housing and transportation, access to healthcare, access to food, and access to obtaining documentation, such as identification cards, to promote self-sufficiency. Our island observes Homelessness Awareness recognize the invaluable contributions and unwavering commitment of those who work to assist our neighbors at risk of homelessness and those without a home through advocacy, efficient access to assistance. Our neighbors can find permanent housing and begin independently living for themselves and their families. Now, therefore, I, Joshua F. Tenorio, Segundo Magalahing Guahan, Lieutenant Governor of Guam, together with Lourdes A. Leon Guerrero, Magahagan Guahan, Governor of Guam, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Organic Act of Guam as amended, do hereby proclaim November 2023 as Homelessness Awareness Month. Congratulations and Biba to the Guam Homeless Coalition.
A round of applause for our acting governor, Joshua Tenorio. And many thanks to the Guam legislature. Thank you very much. Well, continuing on with our presentation this morning, we're going to go ahead and bring up our friends, our leadership from the Guam Homeless Coalition. They're going to be doing a review of 2023. And those folks I would like to invite up include our chairperson, Mrs. Samantha Taitano, and Vice Chair Robson Augustine. Please give them applause.
Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you guys. This is our second annual homelessness and housing summit. So we're really happy to have you all here. And we really wanted to start this off. Well, we had a really great start, but now we wanted to kind of think about what happened this year. And then that way we can start reflecting on things before we start getting into the meat of this summit and kind of getting into the breakout sessions that are going to really lead us into thinking about the goals and objectives that we're going to create for 2024. So getting to the summit. So we're going to kind of do this chronologically. So of course, the first thing that we're going to start off with is the pit count, which we had. We had a little bit under 300 volunteers that joined us this year to do our point in time homeless count. Right now, we're just going to go over some of a little bit of the data as Frank is going to be covering kind of some more data in the next general membership meeting, but just kind of looking at some of the numbers. So as you can see, this year we had a very, very slight decrease in the amount of individuals, an increase in the households with 406. And then we see there's a little bit of decrease in the sheltered, but then our unsheltered has really increased. And so these are just things that we need to think about and just observe as we, obviously, I'm sure that we can see when we're out there that increase, but how is this going to shape what we're going to be doing in 2024 to start really addressing some of these things? We had, again, a little bit of slight decrease when it comes to the minors, but our adults increased this year. 479 females, so staying about the same, a little bit of a decrease, and then about the same again with our males, and then also transgendered or those who are not singular identifying.
So this is me. So in March or early April, we were notified by Attorney General Moylan that he wanted to do an encampment sweep, and the first one was at the Dedo across the mall. So he contacted the Lieutenant Governor and just trying to figure out how to get the agencies together that he could do this action and get the services in line so that once he had the authorities move in, that we were there to offer the service to the individuals. So we had many of our individual or our agencies here that were waiting that day, staged at the Dededo Flea Market and Mayor Savaras also. So our role was to provide the support services when they brought them to the flea market. The result was that 3 homeless individuals out of there are about maybe 15 that morning. A lot of them just walked, went to some other location, but 3 were there, and they had been there for years. When we spoke to them, they were there for almost a decade, I believe, and they believed to have been given permission by the owner, so they stayed there, and their place was, pretty well kept on the side. It wasn't the one across the mall; it was kind of on the side road. They had their cans in one place, and it was, it was pretty, like a ranch. So we took them, we put them in the shelter, and then from then we tried to offer the services that were available. Tried to get their Guam IDs. Also, we tried to get them in the West Care, into the program that was there. It took a week or two just trying to get them to get the documents they needed, but ultimately, in the end, when we offered them to go in the program, they declined. So at that point, we were just kind of tried to help them, I guess, do what we could to let them do what they were going to do, and left that door open for in the future if they needed help. So in times like these, I know we've all come across that. The positives in the situation is seeing that the encampment sweeps may be more in the future, that we started to look at legislation in other jurisdictions to see what was happening in the other states that, when encampments were being, when the sweeps were going on, what were they doing? What were the laws that either allowed or disallowed them being taken off and just moved somewhere else? So we're still looking into that. That is something with the Public Defender's Office, Steve Vittori was looking at. Having the Homeless Coalition be a greater voice for future planning for actions. We didn't have a really big hand in the decision making of it, but moving forward, we want to work with the AG to have a little bit of a advance, go in there and advance and have work, kind of groundwork ready for these individuals when the actions are taken. Stronger advocacy for them, and then for us as a coalition, we can present some legislation to our senators that, if there's something that we see that we can make a difference on, then we can, present this on an annual basis, to have our legislature present the laws and make some laws that make sense for our interventions.
So another thing that we started last year in 2022 was our emergency shelter pilot program. And so around the same time that the encampment removal happened was sort of the end of that pilot program. So we had set aside around $10,000, and we went a little bit over, but this program was really meant to be a really low barrier way to house temporarily a maximum of 5-night stay for individuals. And so these monies were all coming from fundraising monies and donations that the coalition has received. And so through that program, we realized that, of course, this was a gap, but we were able to house 18 households, which came out to 39 individuals. 11 of those households exited into housing. And so majority of that was that they were able to take that time, those 5 days, sometimes a little bit less, to reconnect with family and friends to try to at least become temporarily housed. So we had a lot of those, but we were able to have 3 people who found permanent housing afterwards. And so, yeah. So we saw that this program really was impactful, really worked. We saw that people were able to get housed. And so this is something that I know that the fundraising committee and then also like the housing committee are trying to work on together so that we can solicit more funding for this program so that in 2024 we'll be able to run it for a little bit longer than we were able to last year. So yeah. Also, I wanted to highlight in this section that throughout 2023, and we're not even over yet, so far we've assisted with over 100 financial assistance requests. And so all of these requests can be from small things like helping pay for identification documents. So a lot of times it's passports from other countries or from off island. It can be birth certificates, green cards. We did a green card recently. Also, a lot of times when somebody is able to get a voucher, sometimes they have utilities arrears that they need to be taken care of. And all of the coalition members know that if there is no other funding source at the coalition, they can always request those financial assistance from the coalition. Additionally, we helped with some medical needs. I saw that we paid for some glasses, other modifications to units, employment needs. So things to help people overcome those barriers and get employment. And then also, I believe we processed 2 requests, 8, right? One was a family of 8 with airline tickets to reunite with them with their families so that they could get out of homelessness. Additionally, some of our partner programs. So as you guys know, we partnered with Department of Revenue and Taxation, and then Rob helps coordinate all of that for the Guam IDs. And so again, identification documents, we all know that that's one of the things that just happens to get lost or stolen a lot. And so being able to help them with this really kind of sets them in the right trajectory. And we were able to assist with 89 Guam IDs. And then the Ajuda shuttle, numerous rides, but we were able to process 72 Ajuda shuttle IDs this year.
Okay, so then in April, we did our Passport to Services. It's our annual thing we do it usually at Paseo, Chamorro Village. So this year, our West Care was the lead agency that coordinated everything. So we appreciate that. It went over really well. From that, we assisted 162 households, which was 266 individuals. Looking at the data, when we had the information given, these were the top 5 services that were needed, and these are generally the basic barriers that we face every year. Assistance finding a job, finding housing, transportation, and then a lot of it was access to healthcare, dental care, healthcare, behavioral healthcare, and then there's, I think that's about it. Yeah. So those top 5, it's mostly access to opportunity, transportation, and then the medical care.
Yeah, and West Care, want to shout out to them again because they did a great job of bringing a ton of players to the Passport to Services, including educational institutions. So like GCA was there and GCC. So we had a really, really well-rounded passport this year.
Oh, so then after that, we did have the first summit in November, but took all that time to get all the information together, and we released the action framework at the early May or end of April. So this is the first ever framework that created a 5-year path to help us in our efforts to build onto a 5-year plan that was going to increase our capacities and our capabilities. That year, we identified gaps and assessed the state of homelessness in Guam. We performed SWOT analyses to determine the action items, and then we established our 1, 3, and 5-year goals. Most of the 1-year goals are most of those, and then those were intended to lay the base. And then once the 3 and the 5-year goals, they're a little bit less, so that the work became a little bit easier as we move on and we get those ground work going. So that's basically we're going to do that same thing this year and reassess what we did, and then address what we may have not addressed last year. So this is the big thing that we went through this year. So Typhoon Mawar happened end of May, and it's pretty much happened for the next 6 months. The worst weather event we've had in 2 decades. And then because of that, Lieutenant Governor asked me to team up with, or you kind of stick with American Red Cross. So I just kind of hung on their coattails the whole time that everything is happening when they had their meetings at Homeland, just trying to learn how they operate in these situations. So we started a shelter transition committee that we brought on Sam so that Coalition had at least an ear there, you know, so we knew what was going on and we figured out how to mobilize the coalition. So we brought together FEMA, American Red Cross, Continuum of Care, that we could discuss the needs at the shelters and how the local government and the nonprofits could assist. And that also included the VOAD, which was activated. So the services needed at the shelters were, you know, translation, understanding household dynamics. When the American Red Cross workers were there, they were, you know, would be there'd be 20 people and they wouldn't understand the household and who was who. So having, you know, Minyatlu there and other groups, they could explain how, you know, FAS families would, you know, have their household set up. Having some cultural sensitivity, that was a little bit of a challenge there also. Connection to needed local services. I know a lot of the federal groups, American Red Cross, they had their reps coming from off island, so they didn't understand their main point was just to go to the mayor's office, and you know the mayors were they're dealing with their own crisis within the village, and then they had all these other programs to try to implement. So going in there to the shelters and saying, hey, we can do this, let the coalition help. Tell us what you need and we'll try to connect that also. That was a big help. Obtaining documents, working with public health, getting the vital documents needed. And then once we got in there and we had our mini passports every week, sharing the resources so that we didn't have to have a sharing agreement. We could all just be in the same table at one time and say, hey, you can do this, you can do this, you know, where can we get you to help out? So American Red Cross, they ran the shelters. This is the first time that they ever provided shelter on Guam. And that shelter was 750 plus people. During the after the post typhoon, there were 3 shelters open that they had varying challenges and capabilities that we all witnessed when we were there. With the shelter and the community outreach, the coalition planned weekly outreaches there to assist FEMA and American Red Cross to ensure they had access to the services that we had access to. And then training for shelter management. I thank everybody that signed up and went through the American Red Cross training. So now that we have a better understanding of what we can do in the future, what the logistics are, and when the personnel are going to be needed, we'll tap onto that also.
Shortly, once we kind of settled down, well, I guess we're still settling down from the typhoon. Thanks to a lot of conversations that we were having with HUD, most especially our monthly TA sessions with Thwan. He brought up a lot of things, and one of the things that he brought up was the idea of these committees. So we realized that the Guam Homeless Coalition doesn't have any actual staff. We are all volunteers, and yes, we are able to sometimes use our time at work based on like whatever grant that we're working on. There's nobody who's actually dedicated 8 to 5, 7 days a week to make sure that the initiatives that the coalition is working on are actually getting pushed through. And it's a little overwhelming for the board. So we decided that, we know that our coalition members are passionate and we wanted to have you guys be part of pushing these initiatives. And so, as you guys know, we have our different committees. So we have our housing committee, our emergency response committee, data, training, communications, finance, review and ranking, and fundraising. And so I want to thank everybody who's been part of the committees. I know that it only started kind of in the middle of this year, but I do know that the committees have been meeting and working towards each thing. And are also, some of them, not all of them are going to meet today, but they are going to be meeting, 5 of them will be meeting today to really start thinking about, what are some of the strategic action plan framework items that are relative to their committee. How have they been doing as a committee? Again, they've only had several months to be working on it, but there's already progress that Rob's going to share a little bit later, and then also what do we want to do for 2024, and how are we going to strategize so that it doesn't feel like this overwhelming task, but this joint effort that we can be working on together.
I'd also like to add to that, from the HUD TAs, the performance was a little bit less than we would probably even expect from ourselves. So creating these committees would help us do more work to keep ourselves accountable, and then we will kind of keep ourselves in check so that we can all get better as a coalition.
Definitely. And then, so kind of rounding out these last couple months, some of the highlights is really the extension of the Lihing Sanaku shelter and some of the other programs, including Akudi, that provides that case management for that shelter. So I know that was kind of a questioning time. Having to close a shelter is heartbreaking because you realize that there's a lot of people who just aren't at the point where they're going to be able to transition into any kind of housing. And so having this extension, we're hoping that we can continue to get more people, and then as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, there's more things that are kind of in the pipeline, and so we're really happy about that. Also, thank you everybody, because the COC application is not one person, it is the whole COC that is assigned part. So thank you to everyone who was able to participate in the COC application. It's because of you that we're able to submit, and we are able to get the funding that we need to continue these programs. Also, the communications committee did something. We knew that we were going to have the summit, and we knew that there wasn't going to be enough time to really go over all of the different wonderful things that the different GHC members do on the day-to-day. And so we started the It Takes a Village informational webinar series that we've been streaming live on YouTube. And so that has been really a great way to capture the information about each of the organizations and the programs. And it's going to be there on the YouTube. So if you ever need to go back to watch it, and it's available to the community so that they can also understand what resources are out there to assist them. And then here we are at the second annual Housing and Homelessness Summit. Okay, so now we're going to kind of go a little bit into data. So this data is from our HMIS system, which is the Homeless Management Information System. And so just to clarify, these are both done in fiscal years, so federal fiscal years, so not calendar years. And so we just kind of wanted to, again, show you guys some of the data. And this is really on the work that you guys have all been doing. So as you can see, we have enrolled 927 households this year, or fiscal year, last fiscal year. That's 1,925 individuals, which was a decrease from the previous year. 870 are female, and then 1,053 were male. And as you can see, these numbers are going down a bit. We also have the HMIS exit destination type. And so this kind of shows us that in the fiscal year, we still had 1,164 active clients. So these are clients that are still in the system, that are still in the process. And that's kind of that's a big number. But we also understand the barriers that we have. And so some of the exciting things that we have is that 273 went into permanent housing. That's a huge decrease from the previous year. 264 were in temporary housing, 6 an institutional situation, 52 exited to homelessness, and then 166 in other. And so I just want to kind of, share some of the data so that, I don't think that as a coalition, we take enough time to really reflect. And as Rob mentioned, we want to keep ourselves accountable. And so I know that the data committee, the data committee provided these numbers, but the data committee, part of what they're going to be doing is regularly assessing sort of how we're doing as a coalition, so that when we get to that time where we're submitting our COC application and we get our rankings or the scores back, we're not surprised, right? We're like, okay, like we kind of already had an idea about where we were at. And so we hope to continue to show you guys more data on a regular basis on how the programs are doing, so that we can, again, as Rob said, keep ourselves accountable.
Okay, so I tested this all the way in the back of the room. So if you want to take a picture of this and go to the action framework, it's there. So this is on the OHAP website. It's on the interagency website. This is the 2022 Homeless Action Framework that we are going to use for the next 4 years now, to guide where we want to be. So I'll leave that there for a second. Yeah. Okay, so some of the highlights that for the Guam Homeless Coalition, we took out all of the action items because it's a big list. But just to see what we've done so far this year, for the data committee, they put together the annual resource guide that they give out during the pit count. And so we can all use that, throughout the year. Then evaluate the reporting and accountability of coalition members. That's in process, as we said. We're going to kind of more often look at the numbers that we have so that we can, by the time the COC application is due, that we have a lead on the numbers that are going on. Revise the current GHC reporting standards also. That's going to play into the application. And then also understanding the funding sources and where funding is needed and where we can push more to. The fundraising committee, that's Jesse, that there's the head of that. But so we're gonna start hosting quarterly outreach events, an annual community outreach event for the public to come, and it's going to coincide with the Homeless Awareness Month. So now that we have the month proclamation, we're just going to work on creating something at the end of the year. And then we're going to develop an annual plan for fundraising efforts for the coalition. That's already in process too. We have our groups broken out into quarters, and they're going to be in charge of fundraising efforts for that time. Communications committee, just a big step alone was creating the YouTube page and having the It Takes a Village series there, so that there's information there all the time that we can point someone to, and we can learn about what we all do. And then creating opportunities for service providers to meet outside the workplace and practice some self-care, blow off some steam, have some fun. We've had a couple of happy hours so far. So one double from the first one, so we're working on it. And then for training, we were looking at coordination between organizations, doing outreach to increase effectiveness. So we have our outreach chat that if we're out there, we'll say, yeah, there's going to be in Dededo today. We're going to be here or there, so that we're not driving to all the same place and just doing the same thing. We can understand where we're at. If we encounter someone here, we could say, hey, I saw this guy here, put on the chat. Does anyone have his story? Who's the lead on this? And then, we become more efficient that way. So Government of Guam highlights our main things that we saw from the information we got last year was just increasing, translation, interpreting services at the agencies, public health, all the agencies that provide public benefits for the people. Greater access to customers. A lot of them work at jobs. They don't have time to go and pay their bill on the weekend, so they get stuck paying late fees, and that just kind of builds. So we talked about trying to have weekend hours for like DMV, public health. Still in the works. That'll take a lot of manpower and shifting overtime. So that has to be addressed. Being more active on social media to give up-to-date information for all our agencies. I think a lot have been doing that. Instagram's a great help with that. And that's overall improvement of customer service and efficiency. For OHAP, so we also developed our list of resources that we need to publish on the website. And then an easily accessible web. And there is one for the interagency now. I wanted to do the interagency one to kind of bring the coalition and the mayor's council together more, and establish the one big thing that we're going to try to get going this year, as the lieutenant governor says, is establish a bed at night. That's going to be huge. Once the government has a little bit GHC and other agencies that have that, and then we can all kind of work together and strengthen that. We're still going to be working on a transitional facility. I know a lot of when we talk to GMH, they call us to say, "Hey, we have this person that's going to be released back into homelessness. He has nowhere to go," and we're stuck with the same thing as we don't really have a place either. So as we have the Inigo apartments, we're hoping to even set aside maybe a unit or two so that GMH can have that also, so that we don't have an elderly person that still needs medical care and he's just out there with bandages on his legs. And we'll have a place for that. UOG and GCC, we need an increase of social workers. And so by the executive order here, it's a lot of words, but we are trying to do that. And, just, it doesn't have to be a focus for the coalition, just regular government and coalition people. We can have these other works that kind of already do this in the meantime. There is some talk with, the social work group with their Hawaii Manoa program to kind of also increase that and provide more incentive for students also. With public health, the biggest thing is, the processing time for applications. So in our 1, 3, and 5 years, our hopeful thing was to, keep as every year or period, we graduate to every period, that the processing time gets less, so that by the end of the 5 years, maybe we can have a 48-hour, processing time, and people can have their benefits within, 2 days of applying. A big step is having them not have to get a marriage verification anymore to apply for their SNAP renewals. More Medicaid outreach in substandard areas due to COVID, and having more, going out to zero down in the other underserved areas, having them more sign up for Medicaid and, to increase that population and funding source for the island also. And we're going to have to go with Office of Technology too. I know looking at during the disaster, we look at FEMA site and they had, a tab to go across any language you needed. I really want to try to do that with the government of Guam also, and have that access for everyone. Behavioral health, they do so much. They're great. They sponsor today's event, so we're super thankful for that. But also with our staff program, and we're also going to work with Togi on that. As Lieutenant Governor said, he wants to have this in January. I'm working with Brian from Togi to try to really get this thing, the ideas cemented, so that we can get working on that. Creative marketing campaigns to advertise their services. The biggest thing was the 988 during COVID, during the typhoon. They had a huge increase of calls during that time, and they did a great job with that. So just campaigns that focus on mental health in general and helping individuals increase their coping skills. With DOC, just for those who are coming out of incarceration, OHAP gets a lot of those calls. I think Rose brings a lot to us also, that they need services. They're just released and they just have nowhere. They don't have anything. They don't have ID, don't have a job. They don't have a place to stay. So we're going to try to work on that by the time they get out. Try to have them have their vital documents. An ID, having to have a lead on work, so that they can get back to gainful life as soon as possible once they're out. I think that's it for that. Yeah, we're good. We cut out a lot because that's a lot of agencies I would have to mention.
Thank you. I'm just going to put our agenda back on. If I can get this to work. Okay. We're almost
Save a couple
there.
minutes.
We saved a couple minutes. Okay. Do you guys want to take the break now, or do you guys want to take the break after? Now? Okay. Let's take, okay. We hear you. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break. If everybody can come back by 10. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's donuts and there should also be fruit out there. So unfortunately, no eating in here, but feel free to snacky snack outside.
When it rains, pour, but you didn't need another. It ain't raining anymore. It's not the same. Well, the sky's finally open. Rain and wind stop blowing, but you still got the same. You hold tight to your umbrella. Darling, I'm just trying to tell you that this all is yellow red and the grease to nothing. Tired of freedom. This is it's all hanging out. You're I quite like my follow me, don't you and bargain with me. There's no way I will turn you off me. I don't owe you much. I don't owe you time. I quite like you. Promise that I'll eat it too. I can't eat it too. If I get hold it now, maybe I won't. And hate to Are you the person to me? For somebody I can't do. I don't care too much. Why this time I quite like you. I probably that outside my money's in a bag in the backfire. The future's overdue. Yeah, I know that. Turning engine on a sun blaring out a dead radio. Singing I need to know. No turning back. I've been thinking, baby, when you say the pain, at the same time, we're just waiting for a change to follow. We don't always get what we want. Freedom from the pain to something more. And we shall overcome as we've done before. Scrolling through my life, I barely recognize from one road to another. Taking the lonely, got attached. Yeah. Ready enough to calm your arms wrapped around when the fever took. Thought I was gone for good. You brought me back. I've been singing, baby. We said the pain.
All right, we'd like to give everybody a minute or two to come back in so we can go ahead and resume our program. If you're on your way out, don't forget to tell those folks way out there in the back to come on back in. We're going to go ahead and get started again. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. We're gonna go ahead and resume with our programming over here. So let's go ahead and talk about emergency recovery. That's gonna be our next subject. The leadership, the players, and in retrospect of how it was affected by Typhoon Mawar. VOAD. Anybody ever heard of VOAD? Just breaking it down. VOAD stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. And so today we have three folks that are going to be coming up to speak on that subject, and they'll be here as a panel. We'll be asking them some questions, and of course, they can also elaborate on their own thoughts and anecdotes they would like to share with you. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and invite our guest panelists up here. First one, of course, is Diane Calvo. Hello. Mrs. Calvo here. She is the executive director of Catholic Social Service, which is an organization dedicated to serving elderly, the abused, individuals with disability, and the homeless. Diana is the outgoing chairperson of the Guam VOAD. Also inviting up, we'd like to invite up the Honorable Robert Hoffman. He is the mayor of the municipality of Sinahanya. He is currently vice president for the Mayor's Council of Guam, as well as a vice chair of Interagency Council on Homelessness and Poverty Prevention. And our third panelist would be Charles Craig from FEMA, Region 9, Voluntary Agency Liaison representing California, Arizona, Nevada, CNMI, American Samoa, and Guam. We're going to be asking them the several questions, and they will answer at their leisure. And of course, after they answer that, or that person answers that question, they can go ahead and share the microphone with the next person who may want to add something else. So we're going to go ahead and give up the microphone. Before we actually do get started, does anybody want to add anything to how I introduced you? If that's good, okay, then let's go ahead. We'll start with our friend Charles from FEMA. First question. Sir, what role does your organization play in disaster planning, disaster response, and disaster recovery? And after you, and like to add onto that, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Terry. So I hope all of you are familiar with FEMA. It's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We are involved in all aspects of disaster. We work with the territory to support them. Our authorization to help comes from an act of Congress called the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. It was passed back in 1988 and has been amended several times. But basically, it states that the territory has primary responsibility for its citizens for response and recovery. And FEMA will come through and supplement whatever the territory is not able to provide. So when it comes to planning, we work with the territory to set up an emergency response plan. We have what we call our Incident Management Assistance Team, or IMAT, that will come out and work with the territory to do the response. And then we have programs like I work for, individual assistance, that will come through and help with recovery. So response, recovery, and planning are all part of what we do.
Good morning. So Catholic Social Service is a Catholic charities agency. It's one of over 100 agencies in the United States that provides as its core mission hunger prevention and poverty reduction. And we also have a disaster response framework as part of our entity. For Catholic Social Service on Guam, our involvement with disaster planning is really in assisting the clients that we serve to develop their own emergency response plans. And that also extends to working with individuals with disabilities to help them become aware that on how to respond in the event of any kind of disaster, typhoons, earthquakes, man-made disasters such as chemical spills, flooding. How we help to prepare that response is for some of our programs, we do drills. So we would plan a drill that there's an earthquake, and we would work with individuals to show them how to respond when the world is shaking, when there is a typhoon. We pretty much adopt what Homeland and gives out as how to monitor the weather through the radio announcements, how to prepare your stash of packaged foods and water and those kind of actions, so that when the storm does hit, then we're prepared. We're in a shelter that is able to withstand the winds. We're able to ride it out. And then in our disaster recovery, it's assisting those individuals within our own sheltered space to transition back to some level of normalcy. To the community, as with MOAR, we provided some food assistance through our food bank distribution, particularly because the core 2, core 3, and then going into core 1 was about a period of 5 days. So when you're kind of in shelter 5 days, all you do is eat. Everybody's going to be eating all your emergency food provisions. So by the time the storm has passed, we really are down to, minimal supplies. And then CSS on the larger scale is also a member of the Guam Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters, as what Mr. Craig had mentioned. And in that capacity, we partner with other organizations to coordinate and assist in response activities, whether it's in feeding, providing clothing assistance, coordinating any kind of case management services, assisting also with either rehousing, temporary sheltering, that kind of stuff. Most of our membership in the VOAD also have a disaster arm at the national level. And so there is a backup plan, if you will, if it was really a Cat 5 kind of disaster. There are resources that can be brought from our respective national offices to assist, as was done in Mawar.
We could move on to the next question if you like. Okay, here's the second question. As it applies to your organization, Mayor, what dictates the change between disaster response and disaster recovery?
Thank you. So for most folks that, I don't know, maybe not everybody knows this, but everybody lives in a village. You go home to somewhere you live, which is run by a local administrator or mayor. Most areas, most villages have only 7 staff and as much as 12 staff. But you know the enormity of the task that they have to do. And people always love to say, check your mayor. And I'm pretty sure this past event, you paid attention to your village chats, because that's where you got information about power, water, resources, and everything else that was happening. And so pre-disaster, we have all of us, no matter the size of the village, has 5 maintenance. Or up there, tree trimming, clearing storms, everything. And then during the disaster, we're one of the only government agencies that does not close. You can call in the middle of the storm and you will hear somebody's voice on the other end of that phone. Unlike GPD who stops running, unlike fire department who stops going out in Core 1, we still go out. So we like to always say we are 911's 911. And you kind of get that breadth of work that we do. So prior to the storm, and then the minute the storm ends and we are given the all clear by Homeland Security, our priority with those 5 workers is to make a path. And when we say make a path, it's to push things out of the way so emergency vehicles and utilities can start responding and getting things done. In between that, our clerks in our office, our secretary, we are calling folks on the list that we get from Catholic Social Services or from public health for people with their critical needs. So oxygen levels, or from Division of Senior Citizens. How's your oxygen? How's everything? How's your damages? And we start to do quick assessments here. In between all this, we're also asked by FEMA to do preliminary damage assessments immediately after the storm. So we're clearing, we're moving, we're calling, we're also out there trying to count. And, I always found it, kind of odd that the minute the event ends, like, okay, how many damages and what's your damage? I'm like, we don't even have a pen and a paper and a phone and a computer that's working, but we figure out and we try to make do. And we start to switch to the recovery part of it. And the recovery part of it is we start getting in requests. We call ours requests for personal assistance, where people start calling the offices asking for, I have my neighbor's tree fell on my house, or I need help, I'm flooded, and all these things. So we start trying to figure this out, funnel it, and send it to the correct agency. So mind you, that's how many staff we have. So as large as a village of Dededo is with 45,000 people, imagine having to do that. So we all end up, we run pre-storm, we run on 12-hour shifts. During the storm, we run a 24-hour shift, 1 day on, 1 day off, and then we go back to the 12-hour shifts until we kind of feel we are at about 80% recovery level. And that's how all offices operate. So that's kind of the unseen part of what we do here. And then it's just a lot of coordination with the volunteer organizations, with the federal response units, with the Red Cross, and trying to get people to the correct areas. In the between this, and for homelessness specifically, is that pre-storm, we try to get the message out to where the homeless that are in our parks, in our recreation areas, in our encampments, and we let them know what's going on just in case they don't know. Some of them choose to go. There's times that many mayors, we bring them on we don't have very pretty vehicles, so they don't mind jumping in the bed of a truck, and we head up there and we give them what they can. And so we drop them. So we've done that regularly. We've worked with OHAP this time in providing, we actually, in Sanahanya, we actually own a bus. So we were able to bus homeless individuals from the cathedral area, which was the meeting point, up to GW shelter and the like. So that's kind of what we do. So response wise, we're still in recovery. We're still doing recovery with Maywar, with FEMA. It's trying to bring our infrastructure and our assets back to normal through public assistance grants. And then at the same time, as we're trying to make sure that any future weather event, we're also prepared on that end. So we're not going to get that quadruple threat of what happened, which was gas, communications, money, and access to and water, which were the main issues that everybody faced right after that. And we weren't kind of normalized till about 5 or 6 days till after the storm. But for those 5 or 6 days, it was critical because people did go hungry. Not just homeless individuals, everybody went hungry because you had to have had cash because all the communications was down for credit cards and everything. So families got together, and so we just got the notice about the weather event for this weekend. We're hoping it stays as far away as possible, but we know everybody's also loaded up their freezers for Thanksgiving. So we're like, oh man, Thanksgiving's gonna get moved up to Monday because if the power goes out, everyone's gonna eat turkey because we got to cook the food. So, but that's kind of what we're thinking here is we know these people, we know folks are stocking up. We know there are people in need, but as mayors, we respond, we work with the government. We work with all governments, federal and local governments as that conduit and that ambassador, just as mayors, but our staff are really the unsung heroes. They're really the front lines of the front lines when it comes to emergency response.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so I'll try and keep this short. I'm one of those baby boomers. I've been around for a while. When I first got started in this, we used to refer to it as a disaster cycle. An impact would occur, whether it's a typhoon or earthquake or fire, that would initiate response. In response, you're trying to save lives, protect property, preserve the environment. Then response would transition into recovery. In recovery, you're trying to sustain those lives that you slaved. You're trying to get people out of congregate shelters into temporary housing. You're trying to get businesses open again. Recovery will go into long-term recovery where you're trying to get them into permanent housing solutions and have the community be self-sustaining again. That would transition into mitigation, where you're trying to rebuild a community, harden it, so that the next time there's a disaster, you don't have as much destruction. It won't cost as much to recover from. And then as you go through mitigation, you will go into preparedness. In preparedness, you're trying to train the individuals about getting ready for the next disaster, have them exercise so that next time there's an event, you can save even more lives, protect even more property, and preserve even more of the disaster of the environment. Well, that was a while ago. Now we have what's called emergency management programs in college. You can go to Homeland Security and emergency management and get a degree in it. And so that disaster cycle has evolved. Now we have what are called emergency management functions. And so with emergency management functions, instead of it being sequential and cyclical like it was in the disaster cycle, we now see that there are some things that happen simultaneously. So it isn't just response delineated from recovery. You can have both of those occurring at the same time. You can have mitigation going on continuously. Same thing with preparedness. So with FEMA, when we look at response, we know that it can be occurring at the same time as recovery, but in respect to response, we look at what are called lifelines, those things that are essential for the community to be functioning. And those lifelines, when we come on island, we talk with the local government and we ask, what's the condition of those lifelines? Are they red, yellow, or green? Red meaning that they're not functioning. Yellow, they are functioning with a lot of assistance. Or green, they're functioning normally. When all of those lifelines are green, when all of them are functioning normally, that's the end of response for us.
Okay, would you like us to move on to the next question? Okay, here we go. Third question. When does disaster recovery end?
So for CSS as a nonprofit, for some of the services that we provide, disaster recovery ends when we are able to rehouse a homeless person, particularly a person rendered homeless by the disaster. As Charles had mentioned, disaster recovery sometimes doesn't end, because when you are looking at preparedness planning and working with individuals, when you are having to deal with individuals traumatized by the whole disaster experience, that actually is a different kind of response then that needs to be put in place. And that's where we have resources like what Guam Behavioral Health has stood up, their crisis counseling availability for those that were traumatized. There was a lot of follow-up for rehousing, both whether it's temporary housing in the shelters or rehousing in order to get people out of the shelters. So while there are certain activities that may end, it doesn't mean that that might be the end of disaster recovery. As the mayor had mentioned, we're really still in recovery. And for some areas, the recovery might be a year or two, particularly if we're looking at either repairing or replacing damaged infrastructure, or in also planning to mitigate, to strengthen our existing infrastructure in order to be more prepared for other Cat 4, Cat 5 kind of typhoons, or with all the rains that we're having, to try and mitigate any kind of flood damages, flooding and then flood damages, that kind of stuff. People recovery and infrastructure recovery are two major areas, and for some, it doesn't end. And if it does end, it may take several years actually for it, as people try to overcome, the anxiety, and then have to reestablish themselves to be much more self-reliant and resilient. And on the infrastructure side, because of who and what Guam is, there's a lot of construction projects. So we are all, whether it's military, government, nonprofit, private sector, we are all in line basically for construction companies and other contractors to come in to provide the repair work or the replacement work that needs to be done.
All right. Thank you very much for that. We're going to continue on with the next question. In applicable phases, what considerations has your organization made in regards to the needs of the homeless individuals and families?
So we're very aware in our districts who are our homeless families, or what we also classify substandard housing, where we know that any weather event, anything above a Cat 2, they're going to be. And we're very grateful for a few programs actually were able to come out after, which was the Guam Strong program, the Rise Up program. But we know it didn't cover everybody. But these were things that were incrementally kind of phased into the part of the recovery part of it. So we were trying our best to prevent homelessness on some of those families. And one of the things I had this discussion with Kat, I think a month after the storm, is not one agency in the government of Guam knows how many homes were actually damaged completely. And that's kind of shocking. And not even FEMA could tell us, because they don't keep that kind of records and they don't collect that data because of the Privacy Act and everything like that. But you can't just off the top say 875 homes were damaged on this. There's not one agency tasked to do this. So somewhere along the line, there might be people out there who are now homeless that we don't know about. And that was kind of concerning to us on this end. So with the Rise Up program, with Guam Strong, we were trying to address those that were known from people that called us and let us know. And there's no self-reporting requirement for people. Most people, when they get damages, and everybody who stood up at the FEMA lines and called the 800 numbers, some of those programs are also, expanded along the way. And that was one of the concerns that we had as mayors, is that, immediately after disaster, most of us are trained to call the 800 number already, or we're waiting for the disaster assistance thing to open, not knowing that 2 weeks after the disaster, more programs were made available. 1 month after the program was the things here. And so one of the things I brought up in some of the discussion with the civil rights group that we had is that I'm pretty sure most of you here didn't know that you could actually get $1,000 for you and your consumers as well, all qualified for this. As if they applied on the disaster recovery, if they hit critical need, it was a $700 giving to you for food loss, and then you did for cleanup, it was a $300 for cleanup. But that wasn't introduced until later on, until the president expanded the recovery. So most people didn't know. So the minute they signed up, they already checked no. And it was just a matter of checking a box and responding. But most people, when FEMA classifies most everybody as survivors, it's hard to take that in. Like, I'm a survivor. You're all survivors of Typhoon Mawar. But for us, how we view as survivors is something different. Like, that's like, no, we just experienced it, but no, you're classified as a survivor. So the classifications started coming out differently. And so for even a lot of the people who were homeless, they didn't qualify for FEMA programs. And so we're like, wow, that's kind of strange. And so they couldn't get the other things, but they also had that. They are on limited income, if any, and their resources were very limited. People had economic injury and all these other things here, but they were basically, when they were done, is they were told, even with the Red Cross part, we can't help you. Red Cross gave them a few things, and that was it. So it's very difficult in terms of phases. It depends on what each of those organizations classify, that they can help the homeless and those who are at risk of homeless, and then those who are affected. So we use it as catastrophic, affected, and then there I think there was 4 categories that was, and it was weird because some people are saying we're going to help. No, the people who's catastrophic, you're already going to get help. So we're not going to help you, but they're the ones who needed the most. We're only going to go after this middle group or this second or third tier or this fourth tier. So I think that's a discussion we need to have in emergency response, because how we do it culturally is we help those most affected, but not in terms of a Red Cross response or from, because even like the Rise Up in the Guam Strong program, it wasn't supposed to be for those that completely lost everything. It was those that still had four walls and everything else. And everybody who lost everything, all the walls fell down, there wasn't much they could do. And they're like, oh, because a program's coming out for rental assistance later, but they're the ones who need a place to stay right now. So we're in some kind of, we need to figure that out.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hoffman. Director Calvo, could you please also answer that same question? Consideration of phases, what considerations has your organization made in regards to the needs of homeless individuals and families?
So I guess pre-storm, we already were sheltering homeless through our homeless shelters. And we ensured that at minimum they their needs, their basic needs for food and water were met. Post-disaster, we didn't go out to do any kind of damage assessments because there were so many teams, like the mayor had said, there were so many teams, there were FEMA teams, and I think even Salvation Army, they kind of did, so there were different teams that went out to do damage assessments, but we didn't have any kind of numbers. How we worked to identify those that were already homeless or who became homeless was really through our own internal network, through our employees, and through also some of our VOAT partners, formally and informally. When public assistance programs started to become available, what we did was assist individuals to register online. And when we did our weekly outreaches, which we started right the week after the storm and Corps, we were also informing individuals of the opportunity to apply for FEMA assistance and helping them to register. And then if they need, we would be the ones to also help direct them to where the closest DAC would be for them to go and follow up. Where we had referrals for sheltering, both in the homeless shelters as well as for rapid rehousing, we entertain those on a daily basis. But as everybody knows, CSS is always maxed out in its occupancy, and we also have a wait list. And the minimum that we can do is put them on the wait list. But what we can offer them tangibly is a food bag with hygiene items, and then try to coordinate with other entities, particularly if there is a need for certain kinds of attention, medical attention, or if they appear to be stressed or have some kind of anxiety. We have those kinds of individuals coming in, and sometimes when we're doing the screening, they come in for food, but we can see that they're also having to deal with other stuff. An example, one of a young family came in, and I happened to hear her talking about her son who is autistic. And so it just so happened I had a flyer from the ACT organization and how they were making their space available for aircon. So you can bring your kids, that they can have, aircon, and they can have the space available for them to get on their electronics or whatever. And so she received that information and then came back and said that was kind of like a lifeline for her because, they're home all day. There's no power. It was hot. There's only so much that they can eat. And that was a positive outlet. So the wealth of information is really just having to get the info, what is being stood up, passing it out to our staff, our management WhatsApp, inundated, because there's JIC messages, there's messages from other partners, there's statuses. And so we're sending it out to our management, and then in turn, they're passing it on to their staff so that everybody has an awareness, because it also affects both our employees as well as our clients. And we want to make sure that our employees are also assisted, because we did have quite a few victims, who had major damages to their homes. So we were trying to support them in their recovery, while still trying to maintain the operations of our various shelters and homes. And then we have many VOAT meetings and Homeless Coalition meetings just to coordinate, the requests from the shelters at that time as they were trying to close down and discharge people. How can we help them? Coordinating even with GURA, because a lot of those families may have already submitted in an application with GURA, are on GURA's wait list. If there is now a change in their profile, trying to refer them to GURA so that could maybe elevate their application listing to a higher number. So there's a lot of that kind of casework coordination on behalf of clients who, in a sense, it's not really a CSS client, but if somebody comes in for food, in a sense, at that time, they become a CSS client. And then we just provide them what information we know. And I think that's the part of the big takeaway is there were more assistance, there were more programs that were stood up to assist. And there were existing programs for which eligibility criteria or the need for forms were streamlined in order to be more responsive to the needs of the masses. And trying to get that kind of information, timely also means that some departments were more responsive than others, really, in putting out the information, whether it's to JIC or their own press release. And I have to take it, I really do have to also do a shout out to the mayors, the respective mayors, because sometimes we don't know where this person's from, basically. So, you have a homeless person with really no home, no village home. And so the mayor, at the central office, sometimes they could be the repository of other things that could be done that mayors are standing up themselves, not necessarily for their own constituents, but could be open for others, depending on where they're at. But it is really a lot of coordination. And with Mawar, the biggest challenge was trying to find communication means, because, I don't want to say, but, I guess if you were Docomo, you're out of luck. If you were a Docomo customer, between our landlines, I think everybody's cell phone was probably maxed out, and because it was heavily used, and for both messaging as well as for contacts, because a lot of the landlines weren't working, at the early onset post-disaster. And we're still having to address issues of homelessness because it's an ongoing challenge with inventory and affordability. And it does have a negative effect. People who were working may have had their job hours reduced, or their place of business closed for a while, and so they lost income. And if they also had damaged areas, trying to advocate for some of our clients with landlords, for those who live in apartment complexes, that was an item of discussion that came up at the BOAT. And so there was really a lot of things that were happening, and it really would have required somebody to be able to manage and navigate and make a list and update the list of all the things that were being made available.
Thank you, Director Calvo. Mr. Craig, got a question for you, sir. We know that you partner and coordinate efforts with other organizations and agencies. Could you just briefly describe that?
So I told you FEMA stands for Emergency Management Agency. We are able to task any other department or any other agency within the federal government to bring resources to help with response and recovery. When I started in this business, the federal government was the only one that was responding to disasters. In 2011, in 2001, when 9/11 occurred, the federal government realized that they also needed to be able to work with state and local governments. So after that, they went ahead and found out in 2005 that Katrina happened, and they realized that in addition to government, they needed to work with the faith-based organizations, with the voluntary agencies, with community-based organizations, even with the private sector. There was a new word that was introduced to our lexicon called whole community. So whole community is the way we do business now. We work with all the organizations that we can. Here on Guam, in addition to the territorial government, I've worked with Mayor Hoffman at the village level. I've worked with the Department of Public Works. We also are working with voluntary agencies. I worked with Diana here with the VOAD. And we're even looking at another entity called a long-term recovery group. We want to bring the whole community to see about addressing those individuals who have fallen through the cracks, eligible for, who weren't eligible for, we're still impacted faster. So look, organizations out there to work together to try and address those unmet needs.
Thank you very much, sir.
That is one of the main things that we're doing is coordinating and working with other agencies and groups. And I do want to bring up something that we were kind of talked on it, is that I know the struggles you all faced in here when there was a fuel crisis, because you wanted to see your clients and your consumers. And it was a matter of where you are on this listing of trying to get in, because they were like, oh, it's going to be emergency responders and all these things. So where the rest of the government viewed what you do in terms of your response was also very hard to do. You basically had to either be in line for hours, and so there wasn't really given a priority of what you're doing, even though you are checking on literally 1,000 people on that, and you want to make sure that they're okay. I know for homeless individuals who usually use parks and other areas, when there was no water and no power, they suffered that. A lot of their clothing got wet and everything else like that. And our concern is mold and all the other things there. So there were needs that they had as well, and how we addressed it and how we worked together was critical. One of the things that we also failed to always think about is, as the island goes on the recovery part of it, a lot of people have to report back to work because that's how they make a living. So they can't get in line for services. They can't call these numbers and be there and figure out. So we would have to figure out a way to accommodate their schedules as well. And that's very, very important for people. We forget about the hundreds of workers who are at Kmart, who had to put Kmart back together so people can have access to goods and cleaning supplies. We forget about all those people at all those other mom and pop stores and the grocery stores and those, the gas station employees who were being yelled at because they're just doing their job. So those are kind of things we do on that end. But coordinating with other agencies, especially, is one of the most difficult things. One of the things we did ask Mr. Craig and the rest of FEMA as mayors is that after the Guam Strong project and the Rise Up project, whatever's left over in the material, can they give the mayors, and then we can give it to those individuals in those substandard housing, or those that didn't meet the initial criteria for those first two programs. And we were told that they're going to give the materials over to the governor of Guam, and then we can make the request from the governor of Guam. And that's something that's still on our radar, because we know people that the minute the storm was over, people who live in pallet houses were collecting pallets, and they were out there saying, "Mayor, can I have pallets?" I was like, "Yeah, have all the pallets you want." And we know because that's how they were normally living already. So it's getting those people in those substandard housing, finding them services. And some of them want services, some of them are okay on their own, but those that were in the shelter, there wasn't much for them. So they were looking for food, and the minute that the storm's over, they leave the shelter. They elect to leave because there's really nothing else. They want to get back out there and see the rest of their items that they stored away either under the bridge or under a stairwell or under in a park area. So there are things that we still need to do, and those coordinating with those agencies, that was a difficult part. Is everybody's asking for information and requesting and wants all these numbers and updates and forms, and we're like, which one do you want us to do first? And I think we need to figure that out as the rest of the government, as of the rest of the other line agencies, and really creating a really big volunteer base of government employees who, if their agency is closed, that they can be redirected to help our groups do their jobs. And I really don't think the government workers would say no, because they want to be called up. But I don't know, our biggest frustration is we're closed because they're not in operations, or we suffered damage too. We understand that, but so did us, and so did everybody else in this room. So can we get some stuff done?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Very enlightening. We got one more question. Here we go. Do you think that the challenges and needs of homeless individuals are considered during disaster planning, response, and recovery?
I can say, as a really boots on the ground, the homeless as a subpopulation is not a targeted population that's identified in any kind of emergency response plan. And what we've done this year, what was OHAB really taking the lead to go out and do the outreach to the severity of the storm that's coming, and then even coordinating busing to pick up individuals along the way so that they can be transported to the shelters. Most of us here who are involved in some kind of response role would be assigned to a particular ESF. So for most of us who do housing, sheltering, even case management, we would be working under ESF 6, for example. And there are discussion, families with young children needing formula, individuals with disabilities, the elderly, those individuals who need to have running power in order to run their oxygen machines, or to have some kind of refrigeration for their medications. Those are the kinds of categories that we have specific plans for. But for elderly, for homeless, there's not a specific plan. And I think that we need to kind of, we're already headed in that particular direction in establishing a subcommittee within the Homeless Coalition on emergency response and disaster preparedness for those that are unsheltered. For the simple reason that they also would fit into those specific categories of either a person with a disability or a person who's elderly. We try not to keep families with young children out in the streets. They've always been a high priority for any kind of homeless response based on outreaches. But for those single adults, we probably assume that they would be, they would make the decision to go and seek shelter, or that they would at least find a way to keep safe at the height of any kind of storm, because they may not even know whether it's core 2 or core 1, or if we're going back into core 4. This, I think, has become this year with MAWAR and with OHAB's proactive response. I think it gave us a bit of an idea on what we may need to do in terms of planning and developing a response plan.
So the FEMA administrator has made a priority for our agency. You guys have probably heard of DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so that is something that we try to do with all of our programs. Rob made reference to the shelter that the Red Cross ran, and they were trying to bring in various agencies. We have mass care as part of our efforts, and people in mass care, along with and others, were there trying to help move those individuals out of the shelter. That's one of the efforts that we are trying to do. So our agency is dedicated towards that right now. And anyone that is in that group, we're going to try and work with them to provide some type of service.
And I'll be quick. I think for most mayors and with the help of FEMA in the discussions is we're trying to using hazard mitigation is to actually make most of our facilities, our gymnasiums, tier 2 shelters. So we can alleviate some of the worries in the schools and in the other areas there, and then we can get services and safety a lot quicker to our individuals. I know there is a need for respite care. I think that's one of the things that we as a government need to do for folks that need to plug in, to recharge, to just get relief. If we can get some of those emergency, get generators and water tanks in those school cafeterias and other places, so any resident can get respite care and cool off and kind of get better there. I think that's one of the needs there. And I think for homeless individuals, it's, we've had this discussion, and I've had discussion with the homeless because we process the homeless verifications, is that their main reasons for not seeking shelter is they don't have the beddings, they don't have the food supplies to go there. And so that's why they don't report there. And then they also, the stigma of people are going to look down upon them and say, oh, you're homeless, there's an odor from you and all this stuff. So they were saying, Mayor, can you just have a homeless only shelter? And then we can all, we can go there. We all know each other anyway. And I'm like, that is an actual interesting idea, because then we can get services directly to you. And, but it's a big responsibility, but it's listening to them. It's asking them what they want. It's not saying us from the government side or the federal side to saying, here's what we're going to do for you, but saying, what can we do? What do you want us to do for you? How can we make, because for some of them, it's just that. Open that up, and it's getting the meal, it's getting the safety for during the event, and then post recovery, it's like, here we're going to go from here, how we're going to do it. I think COVID made it a priority for homelessness, and the government really did a great job of for protecting the homeless. I don't think there were many COVID cases among the homeless, unlike the people, all of us having our family gatherings and everything. They were very responsible on it. Yeah, only one. And so that's testament to all your hard work here and on that end. And you spoke about the elderly and all that. It's exactly the same thing as some of these people who need families who are just on that brink of homelessness. Everybody's just, we have a lot of residents who are one paycheck away, one incident away of just becoming homeless. And it's how do we effectively help them as well. So there are challenges, they do exist, but it always just gets better. I've been to how many storms, and the government's response is always getting better. That's why we have these discussions like this. It's us working together and the sharing of resources. And I think that's one of the things, is the sharing of information is my biggest headache of that, because for whatever reason, sometimes agency to agency, department and nonprofit, we don't like to talk to each other for protecting of information or clients. And I always get mad at some people. I'm like, you know what? I know their whole business. I have their whole verification in front of me. I can tell you who's on and off. And sometimes it's like, no, it's confidential. The client, if the client's in front of me telling me, Mayor, can you help me? I can let you talk to that person. But you're right. Communications was an issue. Prioritizing you guys as first responders for your clients is making that a priority. And then getting those homeless the information through the GHC or a simpler form of that. And that's what we talk to them about, is how can we, they don't need to hear barometric pressure and all the other things like that. They just want to know how wet and how windy it's going to be and where's the safest place to go.
Thank you, panel, for sharing your knowledge and your insight. I know that's going to be valuable, that we can really be able to use that information as we move forward. Thank you. And also to Diana Calvo, thank you very much for your participation. Honorable Robert Hoffman, Mayor, thank you so much, sir. And Charles Craig from FEMA, thank you very much. Yeah. I think we can go ahead. Okay, we're gonna take again. You guys are so lucky. We're gonna take another break. It's gonna be a short one, huh? Y'all come back around 11 o'clock, which means in about 5, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Good morning, everybody. We're going to move on with our program covering areas of housing justice with Micronesia Legal Services Corporation and the Public Defender Service Corporation. Housing justice, okay. Micronesian Legal Services Corporation, they're represented by this lady right there, Heidi Simpson. Yeah, she's the tall one. And Matthew Wolf. And on the other side, we've got Public Defender Services, Stephen Hattori. He's the Public Defender Service Corporation Executive Director. Their missions, I was looking over them, read very similarly. So I'm just going to share with you what their missions are shortly. Here we go. Micronesia MLSC, their mission is to promote equal access to justice and to provide high quality civil legal assistance to low income people. MLSC improves the lives of people of Micronesia by helping them solve important legal problems and strengthen communities through advocacy. While on the other side, we've got Public Defender Services Corporation. Their mission is the Public Defender Service Corporation exists to provide effective legal assistance to those unable to afford private counsel, thereby ensuring equal protection of their lawful rights in accordance with prescribed ethics, laws, rules, and regulations. Their topics that are going to be included this morning will include home ownership, rental rights, fair housing laws, and how they may pertain to typhoon situations. They may even cover some of the recent hot topic, breaking up of encampments. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and leave it all to you folks. I'll give you the microphone. It's all yours for the next 30 minutes.
All right, so we have a lot to talk about today, so I think we'll just jump into it. But thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm Heidi Simpson, a staff attorney at Micronesian Legal Services, and we're here to talk to you guys about housing, homelessness, and all sorts of legal topics that go together with homelessness. So first up, we wanted to talk to you guys about tenants' rights, because lots of people, before they become homeless, and hopefully after their homelessness ends, are renters, are tenants. So the tenants' rights on Guam are relatively limited. We have the 2018 Landlord-Tenant Rental Act. That is where most of your tenants' rights are going to come from on Guam. But there's a couple of things that are on the slide that we wanted to make sure that we share with everyone so that you have a better understanding of what the rules are and what your rights are as a tenant and what your client's rights would be if they became a tenant. So first up is leases. The big thing is that leases are negotiable. So you can read your lease, you can negotiate with the landlord about your lease. You do not your lease. So please have your clients help your clients read the lease and understand the lease before they sign. The other thing is access. So landlords do have a right to access the home. However, they have to give the tenant 24 hours notice. They can't just walk into your home at any time. They have to tell the tenant in advance. And as long as it's during reasonable hours, the tenant generally has to let the landlord in if they give that 24-hour notice. So they can't just walk in, they can't just barge in on you, but you do have to let them into the home. Another big thing, and one that we've seen a lot during Mawar and recovery, is repairs. So this is another thing where you're going to look to the lease to see who has to repair the physical structure of the house. Who is in charge of maintaining the furniture? Who is in charge of maintaining appliances? That's going to vary from lease to lease. Every lease is going to be a little bit different. So it might say the tenant has to do that. And that's one of the reasons you want to make sure you've read your lease, because if the refrigerator stops working from all of these power outages we've been having, who has to fix that so you can keep your food cold? If it is the landlord who has to fix that, then the landlord has generally 14 days from when the tenant tells them to make the repairs to actually fix that appliance or fix whatever that issue may be. If they don't, that's where we come in. That's where you can come seek legal assistance. And you can sue the landlord for failure to make those essential repairs. You can do that. When you do that, you usually are seeking, number one, to get out of the lease, or number two, damages. And damages is basically money compensation for the losses that you've faced as a result of the landlord's actions. Next up is for utility. So you usually have to get an authorization from the owner of the property before you can turn on the utility. And so we do see a lot of situations where the landlord, once you're gone, doesn't want to keep renting to you. And so they have GPA turn off the power or water. The tenant can turn them back on at your expense. Practically, we don't often see that working out because you're not the owner. And so you do have to have that authorization from GPA or GWA. The alternative is for the tenant to find substitute housing, so find someplace else to live. If you do that, this is one of very few situations under Guam law where you can just stop paying rent and it's okay, but only after you've already moved out and notified the landlord. So generally, in other situations, the tenant cannot just stop paying rent. If you want to get out of your lease, or if you want to move someplace else while your landlord fixes your property, you need to get any agreement for rent to stop accruing in writing from your landlord. If you don't have it in writing, most likely you still need to be paying rent. And then security deposits are another big topic. On Guam, landlords do have to return the security deposit at the end of the lease. They have 14 days to either give you that money back or to give you a written notice that itemizes every single thing that they're taking out of that security deposit before they give you back your money. So those are just a few of the overall tenants' rights. And now I'm going to pass to our directing attorney, Matt Wolf, to talk to you about evictions.
Thanks, Heidi. Good morning, everybody. And like Heidi, I'm just going to jump right in because I only have about 8 minutes for my slides. So today we also, in addition to what Heidi said, we want you to know tips and duties and rights regarding evictions. That's another hot topic. And this can go both ways. This can go for the landlords and it can go for the tenants. And most of what I'm going to tell you today comes right out of the statute, which Heidi mentioned, the 2018 Landlord Tenant Act. The general situation about this is that evictions are governed by state law. And so what that means is Guam law. Guam does have its own landlord-tenant statute, but it does not have much case law. In other words, we know the general intent of the senators, and mind you, these are senators from way back long ago, but we don't have, but very few, if any, of our judges have weighed in as far as how this really applies when we put it together with specific facts on evictions. So that can be good and bad. I mean, we don't have many examples, so we can't throw the book at them, but it's also an opportunity. It's also an opportunity for us to be trailblazers and to establish good law. And that's what we need to do. And the corollary of that is that if there are tenants with housing issues, we are here for you. But I don't want an ambulance chase. But anyway, even though states do vary in their landlord-tenant law, and they have the right to vary, the bottom line for us on this topic of evictions is that a majority of the states in the US, majority of them, including the states in our circuit, that means the Ninth Circuit. So for us, what's important there is Hawaii and California, because a lot of our Guam laws are based on their laws. Majority of those states, including those two important states, do not allow self-help evictions. Those are the evictions where you just try to do it yourself. Lock somebody out, get the police to kick somebody out, with brute force. That is not allowed. In Guam, that's explicit, and Most states, that's also explicit. Now, the differences between states are usually just notice requirements. Like in a different state, they would require different notice if the reason for the eviction was a little different, like if it was for non-payment of rent as opposed to, violence or something like that. The number of days would be different, but that doesn't concern us too much right now. Let's move on to actual rights. First, we'll do tenant rights and then landlord rights. Tenants, you have the right to not be evicted until the landlord gets an actual court order to evict you. And that court order can't happen until there's a hearing. And there's all these requirements before you can have that hearing. Just remember that. And of course, that can go both ways. You can use that to help you or hurt you. Tenants, you also have the right to not be evicted for non-payment of rent. If the reason is non-payment of rent, you have the right to not be evicted until the landlord gives you 30 days notice, written notice. Now you can say, oh, what does written mean? Can it be Facebook? Can it be Instagram? Well, we don't need to concern ourselves with that because even though it's ambiguous about written, the notice requirements are still there, and that's strict. It has to be 30 days. Additional rights. Tenants do have additional rights if they are Section 8 or GURA tenants, or if they are victims of domestic violence. We can't get into that nitty-gritty right now, but you can come see us if you're interested. And lastly, landlord rights. You have the right to have a hearing roughly 5 days after you file your unlawful detainer, which is the action to kick somebody out. Okay, let's move on to duties. Along with rights come duties, of course. For landlords first, you have the duty to not do a self-help eviction, like changing the locks or getting the police to kick somebody out. You also, landlords, you have the duty to, before filing your unlawful detainer, you have the duty to give your tenants at least 5 days written notice of your intent to terminate the lease or evict them. Now, let's think about what should be done during those 5 days. Those 5 days that you give them notice on, it's probably, even though this is not explicitly in the statute, when we think about other areas of law, like when the GovGuam agency is trying to terminate an individual, there's also a waiting period. I think it's 10 days. And during those 10 days, just like here, during these 5 days, it's a good faith period. That's what's understood and what should be aspired to. Meaning, if the tenant comes to you and says, "Hey, I'd like to settle this," it would make you look good as a landlord to not slam the door in their face. You want to be able to go to court and say, "Hey, judge, I talked to them. They came to me to settle. I talked to them for a whole hour, and they still didn't have any legal grounds to just not pay." That makes you look good. So this 5 period of communication, that's what the judges smile upon. And so now duties of tenants. So yeah, you can't, as the landlord, you can't just say, "Oh, I'll see you in court." But speaking of, I'll see you in court, if you're a tenant, you better be there in court. You have that duty to show up, even if you don't have an attorney to be there with you or back you up. Go to court, that's your duty. And that way you can explain to the judge why you need more time, to pay that rent, or why the landlord has misinterpreted the lease in this way. That's your golden opportunity to explain it. You better be there. Now, is there any gray area in this eviction situation? Actually, I was going to say there is gray area in a sense that, can the landlord show the place to new tenants if they know they want to evict? They start showing the place while you're still there during that 20-day notice period? And the answer is probably yes, but like Heidi said, they still have to give you reasonable notice, like 24 hours notice. And it can't be at midnight or 2 in the morning. It has to be reasonable hours. But you do have to cooperate once they tell you, "I'm showing the place." So at the end of the day, some tips. First, lean on procedure. In other words, for tenants, were you given proper notice? Lean on that. Were you given proper notice? For landlords, was the black letter of the lease followed? Was the lease followed? Lean on that. Lean on procedure. And also contract law still applies, freedom of contract. In other words, and this is the first thing Heidi said today. She said, leases are negotiable. And that's contract law. So don't be afraid to handwrite into your, I know that you're delivered the lease or you can draft the lease, but don't be afraid to handwrite in something like, oh, before anybody goes to court, we are going to go to mediation first or arbitration first. Why is that good? Well, that buys you more time and that gives you more opportunity to communicate, which again, the judges smile upon. Steve?
Thank you. It's kind of amazing they gave 3 attorneys like half an hour. You cannot get an attorney to stick to a half-hour time, let alone 3 of us. But I'll be very brief, and I'll go into some very interesting issues we had earlier in the year, right, with panhandling and homeless encampments. So let me get started. So I titled this "Panhandling, Not Prisons," because panhandling really does prevent crime, right? I mean, the AG wants you to believe that panhandlers are criminals, but realistically, these guys are begging for help instead of stealing purses, right? They're begging for help instead of burglarizing restaurants, right? And so there was a recent arrest of an individual who broke into Bantai, and all he's charged with was stealing $5 worth of roast duck. But had he been allowed to panhandle in Tuman, then maybe that whole crime could have been avoided, right? And so I wanted to get into the law on panhandling. So panhandling is commercial speech, which is protected free speech. There's a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Reed versus Town of Gilbert, in which it clarified that there has to be a compelling government interest, and the restrictions have to be narrowly tailored to fit that compelling state interest, which that's legal mumbo jumbo. So what basically we would need someone to challenge the law, right? What's the compelling state interest, right? Is it to encourage tourism? That might not be a compelling state interest if it doesn't affect the health or safety of the community, right? And so Guam, and this was in 2015 that the U.S. Supreme Court basically made that ruling. Since then, there are panhandling laws across the country have been struck down. I don't have time to provide a list of all those. But 2 years before that, Guam passed the Aggressive Panhandling Act of 2013. And given the fact that Reed versus Town of Gilbert wasn't ruled on, this statute attempted to recognize that panhandling should be permitted under certain conditions. And so it wasn't an absolute ban on panhandling, but rather tried to create restrictions and conditions to allow it, right? And so what it did was it prohibited aggressive panhandling, which is panhandling between the hours of 6:30 and p.m. and 6:30 a.m., right? Nobody can panhandle when it's dark, right? It's also aggressive panhandling if a person is followed before, during, or after the request, and it is intended or likely to cause fear of bodily harm or intimidating for the purpose of obtaining something of value. It's also illegal if it involves intentionally touching or causing physical contact of a person or vehicle without consent. It's also aggressive panhandling if it interferes with the free passage of a pedestrian or vehicle by blocking progress, or if you're using violent or threatening gestures, or if the person says no and then you continue to follow them after they said they don't want to provide any support. And also, obviously, it's also aggressive panhandling if you use profane, offensive, or abusive language. All right. So for this offense, it's a civil violation, $200 for the first offense, $500 for each subsequent offense, regardless of how many there are. There is no law that permits the police to arrest someone for panhandling. And so we hear about that all the time. We get a list of people who've been arrested. We've seen a few panhandlers who've been held for a couple days. So you're arrested, and then it takes 2 days to get before a judge. In those 2 days, the AGs can decide to book and release you. And so that's what has happened in every case where they've arrested a panhandler. We haven't been able to actually get this before a court yet. And during a Typhoon Marwar, there was an instance of a panhandler who was arrested and held pretty much for 7 days without being seen by a judge. So it is kind of it's an issue that's evading the opportunity to challenge it, at least in the criminal side. So there's nothing. It's not a criminal offense at all. It's like if you get a speeding ticket, the police can't arrest you and throw you in jail and hold you for 8 hours for that. And that's clearly the intention of this law, right? And so we know that panhandling is protected speech. The Guam legislature also explained what is permissible panhandling, and it's panhandling at an intersection, right? Or roadway, sidewalk, or public easement. That if it's at an intersection, there must be traffic controls or stop signs. It must be 18 or older if you're the solicitor. You cannot impede traffic. The solicitors must wear an orange vest with reflective materials. And you're required to notify the chief of police in advance of the solicitation. And then you must also provide warning signs within 100 feet of oncoming traffic. And also must not occur between 6:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., which is the definition of when it gets dark. So this is permissible panhandling under Guam law, but it has not been challenged by court. And this law was created before the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Reed case. So it's something like if someone were to challenge it, you could see the court saying it's unrealistic to expect someone to notify the chief of police in advance of the solicitation. This condition was meant to discourage panhandling, but still permit, like, how firefighters do the boot drive. And so that the speech of a firefighter is no greater than the speech of a homeless individual requesting assistance. They're entitled to equal protection, right? And so, that's one of those conditions that the court could potentially strike down. Okay, so let me wrap this part up. Panhandling is protected speech. I know when I went to law school, I much rather prefer dealing with panhandlers than purse snatchers. It does reduce crime. It gives people an opportunity who are basically off the grid, right? They don't have ID, so they can't get SNAP or TANF, and they don't have any other means of support, right? And so the generous people of Guam do support people who, it takes a lot of courage, right, to stand at the side of a road and ask for assistance, right? And so that should not be discouraged, and it should not be criminalized. Okay, but we just need someone to graduate from law school and challenge the aggressive panhandling act. Then when it gets struck, your name will be in the paper and everything. So Guam needs lawyers, go to law school. So the next one is encampment sweeps, right? So this one, Guam's part of the Ninth Circuit. And when when the AG said that they were gonna sweep the encampments, and it was really confusing because it's really, from my understanding, it occurred on private property. And the government can't be in the business of evicting people from private property, right? Because, like, are there any landlords out there? Right. Well, if there's a landlord out there, right, and you have a tenant that overstays, you can't call the AG's office and say, "Hey, can you sweep my apartment of this overstay?" Right? You have to engage in a civil action, and so the government cannot basically favor private citizens by clearing the property of private citizens, right? So, but I don't know if it was on private property or public property, but we do know this under that Martin versus City of Boise, Idaho case. So Boise has an anti-camping law. Guam does not have an anti-camping law. So if you're a tourist or if you're homeless, you can put up a tent on public land, and there isn't a crime that's being committed. So this one dealt with an anti-camping ordinance in Boise, Idaho, and it was struck down. And the reason it was struck down was because it the Ninth Circuit said it amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. So the Eighth Amendment, right? You can't is a prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. And so what the Ninth Circuit held was that as long as there is no option of sleeping indoors, the government cannot criminalize indigent homeless people for sleeping outdoors on public property on the false premise they had a choice in the matter. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear the appeal from that ruling, which pretty much makes it a good law on Guam because we are within the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit, in another case, also determined that unhoused people have a protected property interest in their belongings in makeshift temporary housing in public areas, even if left unattended temporarily. So what that means is if there is going to be a sweep, that you have to like box up the personal effects of the person who occupied that and store it somewhere and give people an opportunity to claim their property. Some counties have actually been sued. So for like, I mean, a lot of money, like some in the millions, right? For destroying people's private property during some of these encampment sweeps. So there's a lot of liability if you don't if you're not careful. Guam, I know the Guam Homeless Coalition, right? The OHAB, they have like a locker for personal effects. So that's an incredible service. A lot of our clients don't have IDs, or if they're arrested, their IDs taken or it's confiscated, and then they have to start from scratch. And if I challenge anyone here, you go try to get a Guam ID without a birth certificate, without a social security card, without money, and see how far you get. All right. Well, anyways, I'm sorry, that's a little rant, right? Anyways, so back to encampment suites. Guam is ahead of the curve when it comes to some laws prescribing conduct. Like I said, we have no laws against camping on public property. We have no laws which ban sleeping in public places. For example, some jurisdictions actually prohibit sleeping in certain areas from 6:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning. So, and then some other places, one that was recently upheld was a ban on sleeping in on the grounds of the city hall during the daytime. So you could sleep on the property of city hall at nighttime, but you cannot sleep there during the daytime. All right. So Guam doesn't really have any laws that prohibit it. The only law that I could find was the public nuisance. So the Attorney General does have the power to abate public nuisances. There is a law which states if you refuse to correct a public nuisance, you could be charged with a misdemeanor. However, whether 1/10 in a public park is a public nuisance, that's really a question for a court to decide. In the cases that I've seen, they're like huge encampments with like 100 different tents up or makeshift shelters. And there was a recent case where in Arizona where they declared that a public nuisance, and they were given an opportunity to remove their stuff, and potentially they can get charged, and then they'll have that fight over whether you can charge them and hold them criminally responsible when there are not enough homeless shelters within that city. So my understanding is in Guam, all our shelters are full. So unless there are beds available, you cannot enforce encampment, a non-camping ban, and you can't conduct a homeless encampment sweep. I know in the mainland they're doing sweeps, but what they're doing is they're giving them notice and they're actually moving them to other government property, and then they clean up the area that they swept. And some jurisdictions actually have rotating lots that they move the encampments to and from. Okay, so I think I'm about out of time. We wanted to save 20 seconds for questioning. So anyone have a 20-second question?
If not, we did have another slide in here that we didn't quite get to that I do want to just display for a little bit. This is about other types of housing. So not just private landlord tenant, which is what Matt and I talked about, but also in public housing, you have different rights. So if you're a GURA tenant, if you live at a low income housing tax credit property, there may be additional protections because of that. On top of that, if you are a victim of domestic violence, there are actually additional protections. So for example, if you get an order of protection against your abuser who lived with you and you show that to your landlord, they need to change the locks on the home at their expense, not at your expense, so that you can stay safe. And then the last one on there is substandard housing, which has been a big hot topic this year, I think. And Guam does have laws around who can build a house and how. So if you're living in a house that was not properly permitted, that doesn't have an occupancy permit, Public Works can actually, if they inspect it and they find it to not be up to code, they can order it demolished and they can fine people for every day they enter that home after it's been determined to not be an appropriate type of structure for someone to live in. So that's just something to be aware of. We haven't seen a lot of that going on right now, but that is in the law, so it could happen. And then the last thing I did just want to touch on is both Matt and Steve mentioned a lot of things that landlords or the government can't do. That does not mean they don't do it. You have to go to court to evict someone. We see all the time landlords bypassing that, doing self-help evictions. So the solution, if that happens to someone, is you can sue. You can sue your landlord for money. You can sue your landlord to let you back in. And that's really where we come in. So Micronesian Legal does the civil side of lawsuits where you're suing your landlord, or if your landlord's suing you and you need defense. Whereas Public Defender, although they do have some civil side projects, they really work in the criminal space. So, and then those are our office's contact information. You can reach us in person, you can reach us online, you can reach us by phone, and you can definitely refer folks to us as well.
And I just want to take a second to plug our Elder Justice Center. So if you're 55 and older, they will help you with landlord tenant issues, right, Tina? I think okay, good. I'm giving the right information. So 55 or older, tell your parents or your grandparents, or if you're eligible yourself and you're facing eviction, you can, we try to prevent homelessness. So that's part of the reason we expanded services. Call Carol Hinkle Sanchez and the Civil Law Center 969-3131. Thank you.
And we can make our PowerPoint available if you give us your email.
Half a day, everyone. I know everyone's ready for lunch, but before that, let's hear from the voices who actually have lived the experience. And today we're so honored to have two individuals with us today, as well as Ms. Callan Perez from New Beginning. I'll start with myself. Hapade, my name is Dar. I had the honor this year to meet with most of you guys in this room, doing interviews for our documentary coming up soon. And I sat with some individuals who are living on the streets, who are living in residential homes or shelters. And it has been so eye-opening and touching. And I'm here today with another honor to host this panel. So thanks for having me. And let's start with introductions. Today we have Miss Sula, and would you please introduce yourself and give us a brief description of your personal journey and experience with homelessness?
Good morning. My name is Sula. I'm 52 years old. I experienced homelessness in Central Guam for 10 years. And I will be passing to my friend Callan, who knows my story and will be sharing my story today.
Good morning. My name is Callan Perez. I'm a peer support specialist at New Beginnings. One of the roles of a peer support specialist is to provide pathways to treatment for those who are looking for it. So that was my first relationship with Sula. Today, I consider us good friends. She's quite nervous, so I'm going to read her story that we prepared. You're welcome. Before I was homeless, I was living with friends, but when my friends got evicted, I didn't have a job or money, so I ended up on the street. When I was homeless, I would start in the morning looking for a shelter where I can sleep that night. I would try to secure my belongings in the jungle. Usually, I would put it with some leaves on it to make it so no one could find it. I would not sleep in the same place every night because it could be a hassle from other homeless people. I never got hassled by police. They would just wave. But other homeless people could be dangerous. Some of them would carry weapons and some of them had mental illness. I almost got raped a couple of times, but I would try to talk them out of it. They would ask me to go with them to the corner and I'd say, don't think we're going to do anything because we're not. Thankfully, they didn't push the issue. I would just tell them, let's talk about this later. And usually they would forget. For hygiene, I would usually shower at a beach in Hagåtña. It was not a real shower because I didn't have soap, but at least I could rinse off my body and clothes. I never brushed my teeth because I didn't have anything to do so. Occasionally, I would ask for money from strangers. I would use that money for a candy bar or a cold drink from the store, sometimes for a pen so I could write phone numbers down. For meals, I would go to the kitchen in Hagåtña. They provided 1 meal a day at dinner time. For the weekend, they would give me a few extra things and they would also give us water. If they gave us ramen or something that we would have to cook or warm up, I would just eat it straight out of the package. I had a few pairs of clothes from thrift stores. I would try not to carry too much with me when I was walking around because if I had to leave my cart somewhere, like at Calvary Church sometimes, and I would go back, everything would be gone. I had one folder that had all my documents in it. I was lucky I was able to hold on to it the whole time I was out there. I am housed now because I live at the residential treatment facility for women under Guam Behavioral Health. I have lived there for 1 year and 7 months. I signed up for GURA in December of 2022, and 9 months later, I heard from them, and now I'm in the process of receiving a voucher for housing. I believe that no one should be homeless in Guam because there is affordable housing available. I believe that it should be a right and not a privilege. And I believe that ending homelessness begins with listening to stories like mine from people who have experienced it.
Thank you so much, Sula, for sharing that story with us and, being here today with us with an open heart, and you're vulnerable, being vulnerable to stand in front of everyone and share your story. Next, we have Jason. Jason?
Hello, my name is Jason. 37 years old. I've been homeless for about, well, not 10 years like her, but like on and off, maybe 6 years on and off. And like what else now? Well, like the reason why I became homeless was because of dope and gambling, and that was two very strong addictions that a lot of people on island do suffer from, and unfortunately a lot of people don't have the willpower or whatnot to get over it. But I could say I did it, and even though I do gamble sometimes, but it's just for fun, but yeah, I mean, being homeless is well, it's a trip at first, 'cause you have no idea what the hell you're gonna do, but it's sometimes gonna be a scary thing because you're all, you know, you're in a public place, and you never know what will happen to you. But for me, I just learned how to adapt to it because, well, I could definitely say the streets made me more smarter, more learn more. I definitely learned a lot of things from it. So it's it was a long journey, but it's it was worth it, you know. But it's still very challenging at times. But you know, you just gotta not dwell on it too much, you know. Otherwise, it's just gonna overconsume your mind and everything. And
Yeah. So going into, your experience as homeless, as being homeless, and thank you, Jason, for being here and being so willing to answer our following questions.
yeah.
But what would you say is the most significant challenge about being homeless on the streets today?
Today, well, I mean, it's just trying to find shelter and everything. Cause like, I don't know, for us, Park Patrol, they hate us just because like we can't even go to Angel Park. I mean, if we go there, we're gonna get arrested for hanging out in a public park. And you know, they always tell us, "Oh, we need to get permit for it just to hang out." But when other people who don't have a permit, they can hang out there at public parks for hours and hours, but they don't get harassed by it just because we're homeless. They tell us to get out there.
I
You know,
believe I believe the current law today is you need a permit in order to sleep at a public place and to hold an event at
yeah,
public
yeah, yeah,
places.
yeah, something like that.
But
But
they come to you when you guys are hanging out.
yeah, I mean, you know, it's a public park first of all, and you know, we got nowhere to go. You know,
So where, if you don't mind me asking, where is it that you find a place to sleep at night?
well, for me, I sleep in front of the cathedral. Yeah, so because they allow us to be there, so yeah.
And it's changed throughout the years.
Yeah, before like years ago, it was like a little more crazier, but now it's like I guess you could see like regulated, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And how about you, Sula? Can you share some of the biggest challenges that you faced in your journey through homelessness?
Oh, yes, actually, it was really, really hard, like seeking help and finding food and shelter also.
And what helped you hold on to hope through those devastating hard times? What kept you going throughout those times?
Oh, I just simply wanted to make a change for myself.
You woke up one day and you just
Yeah,
said,
I just got tired of living the way I was living.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is a question for both of you, and Sula, you can take it first. What type of support did you get, whether from an individual, a community member, or an organization? What type of support did you get to help you get out of that state of homelessness? What was the first, I guess, program that you went through?
Oh, it was my uncle. So I was walking with my cart and I was just passing through New Beginnings. So I ran into my uncle, asked him for a cigarette. He goes, "Let's go. I'll take you to lunch." It wasn't lunch. He took me to the main Guam behavioral and I did an assessment there. And from there, this is how I met Miss Callan.
And it's been a journey since.
It's been a journey since, yes.
And Jason, have you worked with any organizations or programs that helped you or supported you through your challenge?
Well, I was sheltered in the Catholic Social Service in Ordat for quite a while, but then I decided not to come back to it because I don't know, for me, it was like more fun being out on the streets and got to do more things out there than being I mean, it's a roof over my head and everything, but yeah, I just got tired of it, so I decided to just go back to the streets.
So would you say for some people, homelessness is a choice, or living on the streets is?
Well, I mean, it is a choice because people who become homeless, they did it to themselves. A lot of people love to say that they blame society, they blame alcohol, drugs, and whatnot, but it's the person themselves that made themselves homeless.
Although, sometimes people do choose to live on the streets.
Yeah.
Sula, you mentioned that during your time out there, there are some who didn't. They felt like it was their only choice. Can you talk to us about, just your experience with meeting people, and what are some of the barriers to seeking help?
I'll just quickly share that when I first met Sula, I was helping her prepare to enter treatment. So that means she was getting like a COVID vaccination. We were trying to get her an ID, which, as Attorney Hattori was saying, there's so many challenges, because if you don't have an ID, how do you get an ID, right? If you don't have money to pay for a birth certificate copy, how do you get any other form of ID, right? So we were trying to figure out ways to do that for her. And she was, I think, skeptical at first. She had an umbrella that she put in my car, and she would ask me, like, Miss Callan, don't lose my umbrella, okay? Please don't lose it. Like, if I have to leave the residence, I need that. And she was so adamant, Miss Callan, do you still have my umbrella? Like a week in. And I think that really speaks to her determination, that she's achieved, gone through treatment and done everything. But I think that also speaks to the mindset of someone who's living on the street, right? That they're not used to receiving supportive services, right? And for the many clients that I've had and done what I do, which is provide a pathway to treatment, so many of them are not successful the way Sula is in long-term recovery, right? So I think that there's always certain gaps in supportive services where we can say we can strengthen what's there. But for Sula, I know, would you say you chose to be homeless, or was it something that you wanted eventually to like find your way out of?
Thank you. So you were determined to change your life. You woke up one day and said, I need to turn this around. And sorry, I'm going back and forth with you and Justin. Justin, can I ask you a question? In your time with Catholic Social Services, you were in one of their shelters. Did you have an opportunity to speak with other individuals with other organizations and programs?
No, not at the time. Yeah.
And you would say, what was it that really urged you to just go, not use the services of a shelter and the supporting services?
Well, I mean, it's like all the rules and everything, curfew and all that. And well, I decided, it's more exciting and more fun to be out there. And yeah.
Are there any misconceptions you think that people may have about people who live on the street?
Well, I mean, like the number one conception is that a lot of people think everybody's on drugs. Like, no, it's not. People who become homeless is not just because of drugs or alcohol, but there's also, mental illness and people that their family just don't care about them and they get kicked out of their house. And, there's a lot of factors that come into homelessness.
And what do you think are some ways that we can either implement or do better to help prevent people from, resorting to living on their own in public places in the street?
Well, I mean, that is a very, very, that's a very hard question to answer, but I mean, um, organizations, I mean, it's good that they're around and everything, but it's just a lot of hassle sometimes to deal with it, so that's why some people get discouraged to go and, seek help and yeah.
Do you have any personal like examples of some of the challenges people have faced in trying to obtain these services? You
Well,
say it's a hassle, right? So like,
yeah. I mean, like, dealing with all the paperwork and then, you need all your documents and everything and traveling there, sometimes you don't have a car or you have to walk it, so it's challenging sometimes.
and like you said, it's discouraging. These
Yeah,
outrages.
yeah.
All right. I would love to open it up to all of you if you guys had any questions. Some things that maybe you have been wondering when you're trying to put together your program, in executing your program, or even reaching the people that you wish to reach. Do you guys have any questions for Jason or Sula that maybe can help you answer those questions? Floor is yours. You could just raise your hand. No. How?
Right, but there was actually no, feedback. And so I just kept on moving and doing things my own.
How, Jason?
Well, for me, I did reach out like to my family and everything, but they didn't really care. So, it hurt for a little bit, but then I realized, you know what? I gotta do it on my own. And, when you hit rock bottom, the only way is to come up. So, regardless if my family doesn't want to talk to me or anything, and then, they see me out there, I don't care about it no more. It doesn't break my heart no more because I know how to do it on my own.
I'm sorry, I was housed at the time.
Well, during the storm, yeah, I was out down there in Ghana. We were in the cave first, but then it started getting flooded. We saw the ceiling was like, looks like it's about to collapse. So then we went to the garage and academy, but it was flooded. So then we walked up to Triangle Park, and that's where we stayed at. Indoors though, not outdoors. Yeah. No, it's like a studio there now. Yeah. No, because I didn't want it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Or can you project? Okay, yeah.
Like only like sideline work here and there, but yeah, it's only like once in a while. But sometimes it's just like a BS scam. They only pay you like $20 a day, and you're only doing hard work. You know, and that yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm nobody's chili guagua.
Are you actively or looking for a job that fits your interests? Right currently?
Uh, sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned you love farming, right? You said you have a green thumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe if there were more farming jobs, would you consider
Yeah, wouldn't mind. Wouldn't mind that.
doing that? So any other questions? Mayor Hoffman?
Well, I mean, for myself, sir, I could say I got a very good immune system. I really don't get sick, and I mean, the only time I go to the hospital is if I'm really like I know I need to go there. If I don't, I don't need to go there. If I have to, yeah. But if I don't have to, then I don't.
I have a question. Did both of you attend last year's passports to services?
Yeah,
And what was your experience?
it's the same thing every year. It's just the same thing every year.
Were you more informed of the different programs and
No.
services?
No, it's the same thing every year.
And like,
Like,
how about you, Sula? What was your experience with passports to services?
Did, I went there a few times, but it was mostly just grabbing the the canned foods and didn't really spend time as far as asking for the outreach or the organizations.
Um, Justin I mean, sorry, Jason. I'm so sorry, Jason. Jason,
Darn, yes,
you distracted me with that yawn. Jason,
yes, Dar.
is there any? We're friends now.
Yeah.
I bother him all the time in Aganya. But is there anything that you would love to share with them about like any insight of because you guys are in the other end of the services and the programs and just anything at all in your
Like what kind of insight?
like uh you said passports to services was the same old thing,
Yes,
right?
same old thing, even though
Is there a way that it could be more impactful to you, your friends, the community out there?
well, instead of going there and they're still gonna tell you to go to their office, finish all the paperwork and whatnot, and
So it's just like the processes are just a lot and it's
yeah,
overwhelming.
yeah. Any more
Oh,
insight?
we have a question right here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be one way of helping. Yeah, yeah, it could be one way. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I guess, yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. An idea.
Right, right, right.
So bringing the services to you.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, if people do have a heart to help out homeless people, then yeah, that would be much appreciated. 'Cause like when I used to panhandle, there will be like sometimes people won't give me any money at all, or they'll just give me their mood to ass look and everything. But I always like to say that, a lot of my friends say, hey, like, what should I put on the sign for this and that? I was like, you know what? You could write your whole story why you're homeless, and if they actually read it and they're done reading it, they're just like, that's your own personal problem. But the people that actually donate, give money, and they do have a heart. So I mean, I don't know. Homelessness has been a problem for like centuries already. So, the system was designed that way. So once the system is can actually be redesigned and everything, but the system is still in power, and yeah, it's not gonna homelessness is not gonna end yet, unfortunately.
Is
Yeah. Uh, I have no idea. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as being safe, though, I mean, uh, well, I could hold my own out there, and I've been holding my own out there. So. Oh yeah, that's what I did before in Orda shelter before, before I got the 2 months. So yeah. I mean, I don't mind it, but at the same time, I'm just like, yeah, I'd rather be on the streets. M- it's more exciting sometimes. A lot of drama, but it's pretty exciting. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. I mean, I can say where we sleep at, it's pretty safe because we control it there. We make sure nobody, messes around, and they do, well, something will happen.
so is there one specific thing need of yours that you both of you one specific need that we can help others encourage them to find support and help with? Is the need getting a job? Is the need getting the vouchers so that they can afford a house? What would you say is the main need that we can help encourage others to go seek? And when we had that discussion outside, I think both of you mentioned quite a
Uh,
bit. So what would you say is the biggest need right now that we can tackle first?
uh, advocacy, trying to get a job, and especially like getting, transportation, and that's pretty much it.
And Sula?
Give more housing.
More housing available. Any other questions? Oh, we have two in the back. We'll take him in the back first, and then we'll come back to you. Mr. Hitori.
Yeah, I got that.
Receiving, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Sula has it now, but she didn't have it.
Yeah.
Oh. I've told several of my clients about that as well. They have a homeless mayor's verification, and then they're able to use the Sonoma Mayor's office to apply for.
Jason.
Yeah, I got it right now.
Jason,
Go on.
Jason, did you know that you can go to the Sinahanya Mayor's office and yeah, so that's the thing, and maybe you can share that with people you run into, that if they do want to receive benefits such as SNAP, they can just visit Mayor Hoffman at Sinahanya Mayor's office and go through that process. Or
Hell yeah, it would be
Yeah,
so
it would
cool.
be very useful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would love to go to like Shirley's and use the snack card to buy breakfast there.
yeah, that would be ideal, right?
But unfortunately, federal law doesn't allow it.
Is that a possibility in the future? Oh, nice.
That would be great. Working on it.
Awesome. Nice.
Yeah. Only cold shell gas.
But some stores to buy a hot meal with snap in it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, not a what store
Depends.
that is, but.
Mr. Wolf? What's more impactful, individuals or organizations?
It doesn't matter.
Any other questions out there? Yeah.
No, man, I have no criminal record at all.
What about like shower?
Yeah.
Well, I took a shower. I mean, I know where to take a shower and I got COVID, so,
How about
yeah, but, I mean,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
Well,
I mean, you're, I mean, a lot. Well, I mean.
well,
The other thing.
I think right now, Curtis, I mean, sorry, I don't know. Jason, I'm sorry. Jason. Jason. So what she's saying is there are programs out there right now and of course we continue to think of more ideas and more ways to provide more support for anyone who needs it. There's a lot. So would you say that a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness, they're overwhelmed at all the different programs and organizations, or would you say that they're uninformed, they don't know about these different programs and organizations?
Although they have all one goal in mind, but they're very complicated.
Every case is different. Yeah. And Sula, you had something to say while she was talking about how when you were experiencing homelessness and so
I'm sorry. Sula's so shy. She doesn't, but she was saying when, what was your name, ma'am? The one you work at Kuma Mommy, Michelle. She was saying all of those services you mentioned, like getting a professional outfit, getting access to a shower, going to a job interview. She was saying that she didn't really feel safe enough at the time to think long-term enough to do something like that. Where am I going to sleep tonight? Is my stuff okay where it is? And am I going to eat was like top of mind for Sula. But she said after she was housed at the treatment facility that, now she's working, right? She was able to then say like, what are my goals? But I remember when we first met, that's not something that she would have, I think, been able to avail of. But now, right, she's thinking, do I want to go back to school? Do I want to get a different job? But that was such a good question. Were you right, Sula? Sorry, she doesn't want to talk. I don't know. Guys, clap for Sula. She did so good, right?
Yeah.
Good job.
And and just hearing both of their stories and sitting down with individuals who are actually experiencing it, you'll see, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. You guys all know that every case is different. Every case is unique. And it's really just finding what it is that they need from the beginning to get them to where they want to be. And Jason, we talk for hours on the stair step at Agania Cathedral and we share a lot, but I have a question for you. What's next? What does the future look like for you?
Well, not to sound like a cocky person, but my future is gonna be a great future. Yeah.
So do you have plans to get out of homelessness and to be housed and do more? So it's in your mind, your plans are there.
Yeah.
And it'll happen.
It's gonna happen, yeah. It's like a long ass journey, but it's it was worth it. But
Well, as you see around you, like Miss Diana said, we're all here. And if you need anything, any support to help you get to where you want to be in the future, you have a whole community out here and a whole island out here who are willing to help you. to help you reach that goal. And Sula, what's next for you? What does the future look like for you?
Waiting patiently for my voucher and even visit my daughter, my granddaughter in San Diego.
And thanks, Jason. And Kern, would you like to share briefly about your experience at New Beginning?
Oh, so I'm a peer specialist today. Thank you. Thank you.
And yeah. So before we break out to lunch again, this conversation can go on for hours and hours, and what I've learned through several months of scheduling meetings with all of you and really sitting down with individuals is it starts with a conversation and ideas, and there is hope for the future, right, guys? Jason, hope for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think your friends find hope out there?
Well, some people do, some people don't. So
Yeah.
that's up to them. They want to find hope in themselves.
Is there any last words you would like to share?
So,
You sure?
yeah.
How about you, Sula?
God is good.
God is good. So, and shout out to Callan over here. She does so much, and just hearing her story has been an inspiration. And I hope that you all are inspired after this conversation. And thank you, each and every one of you, for what you do every single day. You guys are heroes, and thank you for having me.
Hello? Oh, hello. Okay, so I know we're all itching for lunch, but right before we kind of go, I just want to go through what's going to happen. But thank you so much to Jason and Sula for being here today and sharing their experience. I'm pretty sure all of our wheels are spinning on how can we make passport to services not the same thing all the time, right? Or, this is kind of opening our eyes as to like, how can we strategize for things in the future to make them more impactful so that people want to attend them, not just for the things that we're giving out, but so that we can actually make real changes. But think about those things when you enter your breakout sessions after lunch. So we're not going to come back here after lunch. We're going to go straight into our breakout sessions. Inside of your pamphlet, it has the different committees that are going to be meeting today and where their breakout sessions are going to be. If you have any questions, you can always ask the team that's out in the front where to go, and they'll be kind of roaming around once the breakout sessions do start. But do have the housing, fundraising, data, training, and communications committee. If you aren't already part of a committee, or you aren't part of the coalition, and so you aren't sure where to go, just kind of think about something that you're a little bit more passionate about from those different topics, and then you can join those conversations. During the breakout sessions, the chairs for each of those committees they have kind of guidelines as to how to lead the conversations, but we're really going to be thinking about, what is our committee supposed to be doing, especially when it comes to those action framework items. And then also thinking about, a SWOT is a favorite thing of mine. So kind of thinking about what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that just your committee are experiencing. And then we're going to also have some of the pit count things. So pit count's coming up. So we want to get a hold of it. So we're also going to be sharing some of the pit count items with you guys to really start strategizing for 2024. We'll also have somebody kind of go around once the breakout sessions are ending, because we are going to end back here just to kind of recap how everything went in those breakout sessions. So without further ado, is Pastor Ron here? Hi, Pastor Ron. So Pastor Ron is going to bless the food for us. As you guys know, there's no eating in the lecture hall, so you guys can actually go to the breakout session rooms already, or you can eat outside. The courtyard's really nice. I'm not sure if it started raining though, but here we go.
I like what she said. God is good and all the time. Amen. Shall we all stand and let's pray? Oh, Father God, we want to say thank you for this wonderful day. And thank you for allowing us to gather together to speak on ways to improve our community. We pause to give thanks for the blessing of this meal. May the food and our conversation celebrate God's goodness and inspire us to greater service. Father, we thank you for gathering us here to share this day and this meal. And we are grateful for time with advocates, friends, supporters, and the food that has been prepared for us. Father, keep us mindful of those less fortunate than us and be creative in ways to share your love. Bless us these gifts and fill us with gratitude and love us as we celebrate in your name. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Everybody says, Amen. Amen.
Last thing, for the breakout sessions, please just try to be at your rooms by 1:10 or 1:20. Give you a whole hour. 1:20 is when the breakout sessions will start. Thank you.